Hi everyone, welcome back. Another episode of Fabric Espresso U2CBS directly from Microsoft Fabric Product Engineering Group. Welcome. Today I have a pleasure to host Qixiao to discuss the newest feature in the area of Fabric notebooks. So I heard that recently we have announced T-SQL notebooks, meaning
Yes.
that Fabric supports now T-SQL as a language. Inside Fabric Notebook supports T-SQL as a language. Why we are doing that? What's the purpose?
Yeah, again, thanks for having me. This is Qixiao. I'm the PM from the Microsoft Fabric Data Engineer teams. So, go to our question. I think since we launched the notebooks, we have a lot of adoptions. People love it, like the experience. And starting from last year's, we are kind of thinking about how we can expand the supporting scenario in terms supporting more language. So initially, we are supporting notebook using the Spark language. You can write Spark SQL, you write PySpark to carry your lakehouse. That Spark basically is the only engine we support inside the notebooks. Then with this initiative, we kind of expand the engine we can support for the notebooks. T-SQL is one of them. And also we also actually is also supporting pure Pythons. But for the T-SQL, meaning that as a SQL developers, now you can use the notebook as your authoring tools. You can write all the full T-SQL commands inside a notebook and also run the T-SQL executions or T-SQL query against the warehouse or even the SQL endpoint to run your T-SQL. So you can benefit from all existing notebook experience. For example, you have kind of one code cell to have one query or one length or one statement. You can have some markdown to explain, hey, what this T-SQL query is doing. Because in the SQL editor side, we have one big kind of the editing areas. Once you have a complex SQL queries, it's kind of the hard to maintain. Now you can have a different code cell to split the complex T-SQL query or command into different code cells, make it much more easier to maintain. And also you can add the markdown cells to explain, make some comments, why I'm doing this, why I'm doing that, and why this T-SQL is doing this way, why the following code cell is doing this way, making the author experience and even the maintenance much easier as a long-term runs. And also because it's inside the notebooks, all the cool features, charting, visualizations, and also
Copilot.
Copilot, yes, collaborations, all these good things is already available for the SQL developers. And the one thing is mentioned is the one kind of the limitation right now on the warehouse side is it's kind of hard to share the code without sharing the data because once you need to share the T-SQL, you need the code. You also kind of need to share with the data, the warehouse itself. Now with the T-SQL notebooks, you have the freedom to say, hey, I just like to share this code with my colleague. I don't want to kind of share my data. So you just need to share the notebooks. And in that way, you can just purely share the T-SQL code with your colleague. So that's kind of the motivation behind the scenes why we enable this T-SQL notebook experience. So we announced the public preview in the Fabric call in Europe. So since we launched that, we already see a kind of the high adoptions, but we're expecting the adoption can be increased based on more and more users aware of these features.
That's awesome. Is that integrated with monitoring experience? Monitoring hub?
Yes, that's one of the areas we are keep working on. So right now, if you run the T-SQL notebooks, you'll notice that because there's two different areas you can basically do the monitoring. One is the inside the notebooks, we have that recent run panel. You can show all the history or execution work from the Spark. We are going to expand that view to including all the history run for the T-SQL executions. That's still under development. And also on the monitoring hub, you should be able to see later on, once the design is ready or execution is done, you should see that for the notebook runs, is the T-SQL notebook or the Spark notebook or Python notebooks. That's something we are working on the latest. But right now, the monitoring is one of the areas we are still working to make the experience complete. So you can expect something, I don't know, late of this year or next year, the monitoring experience will be much more complete.
Sounds good. I want to ask, okay, so I create a notebook. I switch to T-SQL as a language. I
Yes.
attach my lake house. Then I write a query, create a view.
Yep.
And then what's the engine behind it, meaning that am I using the lakehouse or warehouse or Spark SQL? How to know which one and when?
If you pick the language as the T-SQL, meaning that you are using the DW warehouse as the engines, as the compute to execute the code. So actually, inside the notebooks, once you switch the language to T-SQL, for all the existing code cells, if the code cell is written in a different language, for example, for the Spark language, you'll notice that the code cell is marked as unsupported, meaning that if you try to run all the code cell marked as unsupported, you have option to skip that, meaning that, hey, I'm running all the code cell and the current language is the T-SQL. I'm using the DW as the engines. So it doesn't make any sense to run any Spark code anymore because the DW engine doesn't understand how to run a Spark code, right? So in that case, once the language is the T-SQL and the engine is the warehouse. But once you pick the language as a Spark, one of the Spark language, meaning that PySpark, Spark SQL, again, you are falling back to the Spark as engines. Now in the code cell, you notice that all the T-SQL code cell will be marked as a warning marker or unsupported status. And once you try to click run all, in this case, all the T-SQL will be skipped. Only the Spark language, only the code cell using the Spark as a language will be posted to the Spark and run as the current way how the Spark notebook is executed. So in that way, actually as a user, if you're really a powerful user, you know how to write Spark, you know how to write T-SQL. For some other language we will support, you can use the same notebook, and by switch different language, you can write a different language in a different code cell, and also operate with the different data source. For example, if I'm writing T-SQL, I set the T-SQL as the language, I use some code cell with the T-SQL, I'm querying the data warehouse. Now once I'm done with the T-SQL developments, using the same notebook, I switch language to PySpark. Now I can write PySpark and query the lakehouse. So that's kind of the freedom or flexibility we are offering to the user, saying that if you really are powerful users and you do have a scenario with the different data items, with a different language, and use a different compute, it's your choice. So you don't need to stick with one particular notebooks, and this notebook must be stick with the one compute or one engines. So you do have the freedom to say, I like to pick what's the engine I like to use. I like to pick which language compatible with that language, with that engines, and that's your freedoms. So that's the flexibility we like to offer with these kind of the multi-persona things for the notebook.
That makes sense, and I can imagine that it's a huge benefit for those who are processing, as you said, different data sources, different tables, different languages, different engines. Many times we try to switch in between because one language supports some specific functionalities, handling timestamps differently, processing XMLs. So it looks that the Fabric notebook is becoming a language and engine agnostic notebook where you write the code, comment that with markdown, share it across your team, share the code, and then collaborate live as well and leverage different engines. Nice. So, Qixiao, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us today, sharing all those details. And for those who are watching us, remember to leave the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, suggest the topic for the next episode. And until the next time, happy exploring and coding with using T-SQL in Fabric notebooks. Thanks a lot.